You know that feeling when you walk onto your own property and see something that absolutely shouldn't be there. Try a $3 million sports stadium. Complete with LED floodlights, artificial turf, and a pavilion that could host a wedding for 200 people. All built on my land, without my permission, without a single phone call. The HOA president, Victoria Sterling, immaculate suits, killer smile, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. She orchestrated this whole thing. Forged documents, fake signatures. She convinced an entire neighborhood that she owned 20 acres that belonged to me. Here's the kicker: I knew about it from day one. I watched every bulldozer roll in, every concrete truck, every beam raised. 18 months of construction, and I didn't stop them once. Why? Because sometimes the best revenge isn't stopping your enemy, it's letting them finish what they started, then taking everything they built. But before I tell you how I claimed ownership of a stadium I never paid for, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if you love stories about karma coming full circle, hit that subscribe button because this ending will blow your mind. Let me take you back 3 years. I was 42, recently divorced, and living in a cramped apartment in the city while my ex-wife got the house we'd built together. I was working as an IT consultant, spending most of my days staring at screens and fixing other people's problems. Life felt small, predictable, and honestly a little hollow. Then I got the call about Aunt Eleanor. She wasn't really my aunt, she was my mother's cousin, but growing up I'd spent summers at her property, hiking through the woods, fishing in the creek that ran along the eastern boundary. She never married, never had kids, and when she passed at 89, I was shocked to learn she'd left everything to me. 20 acres of pristine woodland, bordering one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the county, Riverside Heights. The property was stunning. Massive oak trees and natural spring trails I'd walked as a kid. There was a small cabin Aunt Eleanor had built in the 70s, rustic but solid. The land was worth easily $2 million, maybe more to the right developer. But I wasn't interested in selling. This place held memories. It was the first thing in years that felt like mine. I started spending weekends there, clearing trails, fixing up the cabin. It became my escape from the divorce paperwork and the loneliness of starting over at middle age. I had vague plans, maybe build a retirement home someday, nothing urgent. For now it was enough just to have it. That's when I met Victoria Sterling. It was a Saturday morning, about 6 months after I'd inherited the property. I was splitting firewood outside the cabin when a sleek black Mercedes SUV rolled up the gravel drive. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked off the cover of a business magazine. Mid to late 30s, shoulder-length auburn hair styled perfectly, wearing cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Designer sunglasses, confident smile. "You must be Mr. Carson," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Victoria Sterling. I'm the president of the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association." Her handshake was firm, her smile warm but somehow calculated. She explained that she wanted to welcome me as a neighbor even though my property wasn't technically part of their HOA. She brought a gift basket filled with local wine, gourmet cheese, and a glossy brochure about Riverside Heights amenities. "We're a very close-knit community," Victoria said, sitting uninvited on my porch steps. "We believe in maintaining property values and creating a lifestyle our residents can be proud of." She asked about my plans for the land. I kept it vague, mentioned maybe building something eventually, but for now just enjoying the peace and quiet. Her smile never wavered, but I caught something flicker in her eyes. Calculation. Assessment. "You know," she said casually, "this land would make an incredible community space. Riverside Heights has been looking to expand our recreational facilities. With 20 acres, you could create something really special. We'd even be interested in partnering with you, perhaps a long-term lease arrangement." I politely declined. Told her I wasn't interested in development or partnerships. The smile tightened just slightly at the corners. "Well, if you ever change your mind," she said, producing a business card from somewhere, "I hope you'll think of us first. We take care of our community here." There was something in the way she said our community that felt possessive, territorial, but I dismissed it. She seemed like every other HOA president I'd heard horror stories about, controlling, a little pushy but ultimately harmless. She left and I didn't think much about it. Not then. Over the next few weeks, I learned more about Victoria Sterling from the few Riverside Heights residents I encountered at the local hardware store and coffee shop. She'd moved to the area 4 years ago with her husband James, an architect. Within 2 years, she'd transformed the HOA from a casual neighborhood organization into what people described as a corporate regime. She implemented strict architectural guidelines, organized elaborate community events, and somehow convinced residents to approve significant budget increases for enhancement projects. Some people loved her, said she'd elevated property values and created a prestigious community identity. Others whispered that she was power-hungry, that she steamrolled anyone who disagreed with her. She's got this way of making you feel like you're either with her or against the community, one neighbor told me. And nobody wants to be the villain who ruins things for everyone else. I also learned she'd been featured in regional magazines, always positioning herself as a visionary leader transforming suburban living. Her social media presence was immaculate. Professional photos of community events, quotes about leadership and excellence, carefully curated glimpses of her life. Everything about Victoria Sterling seemed designed to project success and control. Her husband James was a different story. The few times people mentioned him, it was almost as an afterthought. Oh, he's nice enough. Quiet. Does architectural work from home, I think. One person said he seemed uncomfortable at community events, always standing slightly apart from Victoria's circle. I met James briefly at a local coffee shop about 2 months after Victoria's visit. He was sitting alone working on a laptop, and when I introduced myself as the new owner of the property next to Riverside Heights, his expression shifted surprise, then something that looked almost like concern. "You're the one with Eleanor's old place," he said. It wasn't a question. "Victoria mentioned meeting you." "She did," I said carefully. "Seems very involved in the community." James gave a weak smile. That's one way to put it. There was something sad in his eyes, something resigned. He glanced at his watch. "I should get going. Welcome to the neighborhood, Mr. Carson." He left quickly, and I had the strange feeling that he'd wanted to say something more but couldn't, or wouldn't. I didn't see Victoria again for another month. By then, spring had arrived, and I was spending most weekends at the property planning where I might eventually build. The woods were beautiful dogwoods, blooming birds returning from migration. It felt like a sanctuary. I had no idea that while I was dreaming about my future on that land, Victoria Sterling was already planning to take it from me. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed. The way she'd assessed the property with those calculating eyes. The questions about my plans that felt more like reconnaissance. The strange concern in James's expression when I mentioned Victoria. But hindsight is always clearer than the moment you're living in. And I was just a guy trying to rebuild his life, grateful for a piece of land that felt like a fresh start. I had no idea I was about to become a target in Victoria Sterling's most ambitious project yet, a project that would cost her everything. 3 months after Victoria's visit, I was spending a Tuesday afternoon at the property. I'd taken a half-day off work to meet with a local contractor about potentially adding a deck to Aunt Eleanor's cabin. As I walked to the eastern boundary near where my land met Riverside Heights, I saw something that made me stop cold. Survey stakes, bright orange flags marking intervals along what looked like a grid pattern. And they weren't just near the property line, they were deep into my land, at least 200 feet in. A white pickup truck sat parked near the tree line. 2 men in safety vests were taking measurements, one calling out numbers while the other jotted notes on a clipboard. I walked over trying to keep my voice friendly. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" The older one looked up surprised. "Oh hey, we're just doing boundary surveys for the HOA project. Should be done in a couple hours." HOA project. I kept my tone casual, curious. What kind of project? Some kind of sports complex, I think. Big one. They're breaking ground next month. He consulted his clipboard. "Yeah, this whole section here is designated for the main stadium area." My stomach tightened, but I didn't let it show. Interesting. Who authorized the survey? The HOA president. Sterling, I think her name is. Nice lady, very organized. I thanked them and walked away, my mind racing. Back at the cabin, I pulled out the property documents my attorney had given me when I inherited the land. The boundaries were crystal clear. Everything they were surveying was mine, not even close to being questionable. That evening, I drove to the county recorder's office. What I found there made my blood run cold. Filed 6 weeks earlier was a document titled Land Transfer Agreement and Right-of-Way. It was dated 3 years prior, 6 months before Aunt Eleanor died. The document claimed that Eleanor Carson had agreed to sell 15 acres of her property to the Riverside Heights HOA for $50,000 with the transfer to be executed upon her death. It included detailed legal descriptions of the property signatures, even a notary stamp. My aunt's signature was right there. Except it wasn't. I'd seen her handwriting thousands of times. This was close, but the loops were wrong, the pressure inconsistent. It was a forgery. A damn good one, but a forgery. I photographed every page with my phone, hands shaking with anger. Someone had manufactured an entire legal document to steal my property, and I was willing to bet everything I owned that Victoria Sterling was behind it. I called Maria Rodriguez, an old friend from college who'd become a real estate attorney. We met at her office the next morning. She examined the documents with a trained eye, her expression growing darker by the minute. "This is fraud," she said flatly. "Criminal fraud. The notary stamp is fake, I can tell from the registration number. It doesn't match county records. And look here." She pointed to a clause in the fine print. "This language is copied almost verbatim from a template you can buy online." Whoever did this was smart enough to make it look legitimate but didn't quite nail the technical details. "It's Victoria Sterling," I said, "the HOA president. She visited me months ago, wanted me to partner on developing the land. When I said no, she must have decided to take it anyway." Maria leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. "Here's the thing, David. You could go to the police right now. This is a slam-dunk criminal case. But," she paused, a calculating look in her eyes, "if you want maximum impact, if you want to really make this hurt, you let her continue. Think about it. Right now, she's filed fraudulent documents and hired surveyors. That's fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. But if you let her actually build on your property, the damages multiply exponentially. She'll spend HOA funds, other people's money, on construction. She'll be in too deep to back out. And when you pull the rug out from under her, it won't just be a property dispute, it'll be a public catastrophe." The idea felt wrong and right at the same time, isn't that? Risky. What if she somehow makes the fraudulent claims stick? Maria shook her head. "Not a chance. Your deed is ironclad. You have your aunt's will, her actual signature on file with the county death certificate, everything. Their forgery would fall apart in 30 seconds under legal scrutiny. But here's the key: document everything. Every contractor, every dollar spent, every communication. Install cameras on your property to record the construction. Keep a detailed timeline. When this goes to court, and it will, you want an airtight case, not just for property rights, but for damages, legal fees, everything." I spent that night staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the decision. Part of me wanted to confront Victoria immediately, to watch her face when I exposed her scheme. But another part of me, the part that had watched my ex-wife's attorney twist every truth during the divorce, the part that was tired of being pushed around, wanted justice. Real devastating justice. The next morning I drove to a specialty security store and bought 4 high-quality trail cameras with cellular connectivity. I installed them strategically around the property, hidden in trees and brush, positioned to capture every angle of the area where the surveyor had marked for construction. Each camera would send photos directly to my phone and cloud storage. Everything would be documented. 2 weeks later, I attended the monthly HOA meeting. It was held in the community center, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows. About 40 residents sat in folding chairs facing a presentation screen. Victoria stood at the front, absolutely in her element. She'd prepared a full multimedia presentation. Architectural renderings rotated on the screen: a massive sports complex with a regulation soccer field, 4 tennis courts, a basketball court, a pavilion with a commercial kitchen, locker rooms, and a playground. It was impressive. It was also being planned for my property. "This project represents the future of Riverside Heights," Victoria said, her voice confident and persuasive. "We have an unprecedented opportunity to create a world-class facility that will serve our community for generations." Property values in similar communities with amenities like this have increased by an average of 32%. A man in the front row raised his hand. "What's the total cost?" "The budget is $3.2 million, Victoria replied smoothly. "We've secured a municipal grant for $800,000. The remainder will be funded through a special assessment of $15,000 per household payable over 3 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That was a lot of money. But Victoria was ready for the pushback. "I know it seems like a significant investment," she continued, "but consider what we're getting. Our children will have safe, beautiful places to play. We'll host tournaments, community events, and festivals. The Sterling Sports Complex will put Riverside Heights on the map." I noticed she'd named it after herself. The arrogance was breathtaking. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. All eyes turned to me. Victoria's expression flickered just for a second before returning to her professional smile. "Yes, Mr. Carson, I'm curious about the land acquisition. How exactly did the HOA come to own the property where this will be built?" Her smile never wavered. "The land was generously donated to the community by the previous owner, Eleanor Carson, before her passing. The transfer was formalized through proper legal channels. All documentation is on file with the county. She was lying to their faces, to everyone in this room, and she was doing it with absolute confidence." "Interesting," I said. "I'd love to see those documents sometime." "Of course. They're public record. Feel free to review them at your convenience. She turned back to the presentation. Now, if there are no other questions, let's discuss the timeline. I sat down, heart pounding. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Construction began on a gray Monday morning in late April. I was working from home that day when my phone lit up with the first motion-activated photo from the trail cameras. A massive excavator rolling onto my property, followed by 2 dump trucks and a fleet of construction vehicles. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold in my hand, watching the live feed on my laptop. The excavator's bucket bit into the earth where I used to hike as a kid. Trees that had stood for decades were marked with orange spray paint destined for removal. My chest tightened with anger, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Stay calm. Document everything. Let them finish. Maria had been explicit in her instructions. Don't interfere. Don't confront anyone on site. Let them believe everything is proceeding normally. The bigger this gets, the harder she falls. Over the following weeks, I watched my peaceful woodland transform into a construction zone. The trail cameras captured everything in meticulous detail, every truck delivery, every worker, every milestone. I created a detailed spreadsheet: dates, contractors, equipment, estimated costs. I even drove by occasionally, playing the role of curious neighbor, taking photos from the road. Victoria was everywhere. She posted constant updates on the Riverside Heights HOA Facebook page, photos of freshly poured concrete foundations, steel framework going up, inspirational captions about community vision becoming reality. She gave interviews to local news outlets about the project, always positioning herself front and center. This is about creating legacy, she said in one televised interview, standing on my property in a hard hat and designer sunglasses. Too many communities settle for mediocrity. We're building something extraordinary. The comments on her social media posts were mixed. Some residents praised her leadership and vision. Others complained about the special assessment fees. $15,000 per household was crushing some families. Victoria dismissed the critics with carefully worded responses about investing in our children's future and those who understand long-term value. What she didn't know was that I'd started attending every HOA board meeting. I sat in the back, took notes, and never asked questions that would reveal what I knew. I was just the quiet neighbor from the adjacent property, seemingly interested in community affairs. At the June meeting, Victoria presented a financial update. The project was ahead of schedule, but slightly over budget. She'd secured an additional $200,000 through what she called creative reallocation of reserve funds. An older woman named Patricia raised her hand. Can you clarify what creative reallocation means? Are we taking money from emergency reserves? Victoria's smile tightened imperceptibly. We're optimizing our financial resources, Patricia. The board has full oversight, and everything is properly documented. I'd be happy to walk you through the details after the meeting. But she never did. Patricia left looking unsatisfied, and I made a mental note of it. Then on a humid evening in mid-July, something unexpected happened. I was grilling dinner on my apartment balcony when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting visitors. Through the peephole, I saw James Sterling, Victoria's husband. He looked terrible, disheveled eyes, red-rimmed shirt wrinkled. He glanced around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone had followed him. I opened the door. "James, I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "Please, it's important." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. He walked into my small living room like a man approaching the gallows, shoulders hunched, hands trembling slightly. "Does Victoria know you're here?" I asked. He shook his head. "She thinks I'm at the office." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "I know what she did. The forged documents. The property that isn't ours. All of it." My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice steady. "What exactly are you telling me?" James sank onto my couch, head in his hands. "I didn't know at first. I swear I didn't. Victoria told me the previous owner had agreed to donate the land before she died, said it was all legally arranged. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because she's my wife, and you want to believe your wife isn't capable of something like this." He looked up at me, and I saw genuine anguish in his face. "I found the documents 3 weeks ago. The real ones and the forgeries. She keeps a locked file cabinet in her home office. I found the key and I looked. I saw your aunt's actual signature on other documents. I compared them. They're not even close. Why are you telling me this?" I asked carefully. "Because it's gotten worse." His voice cracked. "The project is over budget by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Victoria's been taking money from HOA reserves, from maintenance funds, even from the community emergency fund. She's cooking the books, showing board members doctored financial statements. If anyone audits this properly, it falls apart. How much has she taken? At least $200,000, maybe more. I don't have access to everything. James stood up, pacing. There's more. My sister Diane, she's a CPA. She does some contract accounting work for the HOA. She started noticing discrepancies. Victoria found out Diane was asking questions, and now she's threatening to have her fired to spread rumors that would destroy her career. Your sister knows about the embezzlement, he nodded. I met with her last week. Gave her copies of what I found. She's terrified of what Victoria might do, but she knows this has to stop. He turned to me. Victoria is spiraling. The project has become this obsession. She talks about how it's going to make her a legend in community leadership, how she'll be invited to speak at conferences, write a book. She's lost touch with reality. And what about you? I asked. What do you want? James's face crumpled. I want my wife back. The woman I married wouldn't have done any of this. But that woman is gone, and I don't know if she's coming back. I have 2 kids, 12 and 9. They don't know what their mother has become. And I'm trapped because if I expose her, I destroy their family. But if I stay silent, I'm complicit in fraud and theft. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket and set it on my coffee table. This has everything. Copies of the forged documents, the real financial records showing the embezzlement, emails between Victoria and contractors. All of it. I'm not asking you to protect her or to go easy on her. I'm asking you to do this the right way, legally, publicly, so that when it all comes crashing down, there's no question about who's responsible. I stared at the USB drive. You realize this will destroy her. She's already destroying herself, James said quietly, and she's taking innocent people down with her. Every homeowner who paid that special assessment, every family who believed in this project, they deserve to know the truth. And you deserve to get your property back. He moved toward the door, then paused. The grand opening is scheduled for October 15th. Victoria's planning this massive celebration. Politicians, media, the whole community. That's when she wants maximum attention. He met my eyes. If you're going to act, that's when it will have the most impact. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, the USB drive sitting on the table like a live grenade. I called Maria immediately. This changes everything, she said after I explained. With James's cooperation and these documents, we don't just have a property dispute anymore. We have criminal fraud, embezzlement, and a witness willing to testify. But he's right about timing. If we move now, she might find a way to wriggle out, blame others, claim she was misled. But if we let her finish, if we let her stand in front of cameras and celebrate her achievement on your stolen land, then there's no escape, I finished. Exactly. We document everything for 4 more months. We let her dig herself in so deep that when the truth comes out, it buries her completely. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about James's face, about the families who'd paid $15,000 they probably couldn't afford, about my aunt's land being torn apart for a lie. Part of me still wanted to storm into Victoria's office and end this immediately. But I'd come this far. And James was right. October 15th would be perfect. Victoria wanted her moment of glory, wanted to be celebrated as a visionary leader. Instead, she'd get the exposure she deserved, just not the kind she was expecting. I uploaded James's files to my secure cloud storage, backed up everything twice, and added the new evidence to my growing case file. The countdown had begun. 4 months until the Sterling Sports Complex grand opening. 4 months until Victoria Sterling's perfect facade shattered in front of everyone. I could wait 4 more months. After all, revenge is a dish best served with a ribbon-cutting ceremony and news cameras. The summer months crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every day, I watched the construction progress through my trail cameras, the stadium taking shape, the tennis courts being paved, the pavilion's steel framework rising against the sky. My property was becoming unrecognizable, transformed from peaceful woodland into a gleaming sports complex that represented everything I'd never wanted. But I kept my promise to Maria and to James. I documented everything. I attended HOA meetings. I played the part of the quiet, unassuming neighbor. And I waited. In mid-August, Victoria's social media presence reached a fever pitch. She posted daily updates, always positioning herself as the visionary behind this transformational project. She'd started giving interviews to regional business magazines about innovative community leadership and had even been invited to speak at a statewide HOA conference in September. The comments on her posts told a different story. While some residents praised the project's progress, others expressed growing concern about cost overruns and the financial strain of the special assessments. One woman wrote, "My husband lost his job in June, and we're struggling to make the HOA payments. Is there any flexibility on the timeline?" Victoria's response was cold. The payment schedule was approved by majority vote and is binding for all residents. "I recommend reviewing your household budget to identify areas where adjustments can be made." The woman didn't comment again, but I saw her at the next HOA meeting looking exhausted and defeated. Patricia, the older woman who'd questioned the finances in June, had stopped attending meetings altogether. Then one evening in late August, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Carson," a woman's voice, nervous, speaking quietly. "This is Diane Sterling, James's sister. I'm the accountant who's been looking into the HOA finances. We need to meet." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in the next town over somewhere we wouldn't be recognized by Riverside Heights residents. Diane was in her early 40s professional appearance, but her hands shook slightly as she spread documents across the table between us. "It's worse than James told you," she said, without preamble. "I've been going through every transaction for the past 18 months. Victoria hasn't just taken $200,000. It's closer to $350,000. I felt my stomach drop. How is that even possible? She's been incredibly systematic about it." Diane pulled out a spreadsheet covered in highlighted numbers. She started small padding contractor invoices by a few thousand here and there, billing the HOA for materials that were never delivered. But as the project grew, so did her theft. She created fake vendor accounts, approved payments to companies that don't exist, then transferred the money to offshore accounts. "Offshore accounts," Diane nodded grimly. "I found the paperwork in her home office when I was helping James pack some things. He's moving out, by the way, taking the kids. He couldn't watch this anymore." She paused, emotion flickering across her face. "Victoria doesn't even know they're gone yet. She's been so consumed by the project that she hasn't noticed her husband packed up half the house." "Where does the $350,000 figure come from?" "Direct embezzlement from HOA, accounts $170,000. Fraudulent invoices and kickbacks from contractors. She pressured into overcharging another $130,000. And there's about $50,000 in what I can only describe as creative accounting that might not be technically illegal but is definitely unethical." She slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything's on here. Bank records, forged invoices, email chains, with contractors' wire transfer confirmations. I've documented it all." I stared at the drive. Combined with James's evidence and my own documentation, this was enough to send Victoria to prison for years. "Why are you doing this?" I asked Diane. "You're risking your career, potentially your freedom if she finds out before we go public." Diane's jaw tightened. "Because I have a 16-year-old daughter who watches everything I do. She's learning from me what it means to be an adult, what it means to have integrity. How can I teach her to do the right thing if I stay silent about fraud and theft?" Victoria threatened to destroy my accounting practice, to tell every client I'm incompetent, to file false complaints with the state licensing board. But you know what? She can try. Because I'd rather lose my business than lose my ability to look my daughter in the eye. There was steel in her voice, the kind of quiet strength that comes from making a hard choice and accepting the consequences. "There's something else you should know," Diane continued. "Victoria's been drinking heavily. James says she goes through 2 bottles of wine most nights, starts as soon as she gets home. She's unraveling, but she's also becoming more dangerous because she can't afford for any of this to come out. She's in too deep." Over the next hour, Diane walked me through the financial maze Victoria had created. It was sophisticated enough to fool casual oversight, but sloppy enough that a real audit would expose everything immediately. The HOA board consisted of busy professionals who trusted their president and didn't have time for deep dives into spreadsheets. Victoria had counted on that trust and exploited it ruthlessly. "The grand opening is scheduled for October 15th, I said. "That's 7 weeks away." "I know." Diane gathered her documents. "James told me about your plan, and I think it's right. If we expose this now, Victoria will find a way to shift blame to claim she was misled by contractors or that accounting errors were made. But if we wait until she's standing in front of cameras, ribbon-cutting scissors in hand, celebrating her legacy project on land she stole," she smiled grimly, "there's no talking your way out of that." We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to stay in contact. As Diane prepared to leave, she touched my arm. "I know this is about your property, about justice for what she did to you," she said. "But it's also about every family in Riverside Heights who paid $15,000 they couldn't afford." About every resident who trusted their HOA president to act in their interests. About showing my daughter that sometimes you have to stand up to powerful people even when it's terrifying. Especially when it's terrifying. After she left, I sat alone in the coffee shop, 2 USB drives in my pocket containing evidence that would destroy Victoria Sterling's life. Part of me felt sick about what was coming, not because Victoria didn't deserve it, but because her children would suffer. Because James, who'd tried to do the right thing, would still carry the burden of being married to a woman who'd committed fraud on this scale. Because dozens of families would feel betrayed by someone they'd trusted. But Diane was right. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. It was about standing up and saying that powerful people don't get to lie, steal, and destroy other people's lives without consequences. I drove back to my apartment and added Diane's evidence to my growing case file. The trail cameras sent me a new photo, the stadium lights being tested blazing bright against the evening sky. In 7 weeks, those lights would illuminate Victoria Sterling's downfall. I could wait 7 more weeks. The truth had waited long enough. It could wait a little longer for the perfect moment. And that moment was coming whether Victoria Sterling was ready for it or not. October 15th arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, brilliant blue sky leaves, just beginning to turn gold and crimson. It was the kind of day that made everything feel possible, the kind of day where dreams came true. Or in Victoria Sterling's case, the kind of day where everything fell apart. I'd barely slept the night before running through the plan with Maria one final time. We had 3 attorneys standing by 2 forensic accountants ready to testify, and Detective Sarah Chen from the County Fraud Division coordinating with us. James and Diane had both given official statements. The trail camera footage was compiled into a comprehensive timeline. Every document was organized, indexed, and ready for immediate legal action. "Are you sure you want to do this publicly?" Maria had asked me one last time. "We could handle this quietly, file charges, let the courts work through it." But I'd thought about Patricia, who'd stopped coming to meetings because she couldn't afford to fight Victoria. About the woman whose husband had lost his job, but still owed $15,000. About every family who'd trusted their HOA president to do the right thing. "No," I'd said. "This needs to be public. People need to see what she did." The grand opening was scheduled for 2 o'clock. I arrived at 1:30 parking along the street where dozens of other cars already lined up. The transformation of my property was complete, and I had to admit, despite everything, it was impressive. The Sterling Sports Complex sprawled across 15 acres of what had been pristine woodland. The main stadium featured a regulation soccer field with artificial turf that probably cost more than my car. LED floodlights towered above, capable of turning night into day. 4 tennis courts with championship-grade surfaces. A full basketball court. The pavilion was a modern architectural marvel, with soaring ceilings, a commercial kitchen visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, and a stone fireplace that must have cost $50,000 alone. Banners hung everywhere. Grand opening celebration, Sterling Sports Complex building, community building future. A red ribbon stretched across the main entrance waiting for scissors. The parking lot was packed. I recognized most of the Riverside Heights residents. Families with children already eyeing the playground, teenagers checking out the basketball court, elderly couples admiring the walking trails Victoria had installed around the perimeter. There were also people I didn't recognize, local politicians with their practiced smiles, reporters from regional news outlets setting up cameras, and what looked like representatives from the state HOA association. At the center of it all stood Victoria Sterling, and she was absolutely radiant. She wore a white designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment, tailored perfectly expensive jewelry catching the sunlight. Her auburn hair was styled in soft waves, makeup flawless, smile dazzling. She moved through the crowd like a celebrity, shaking hands, posing for photos, accepting congratulations with gracious humility that was entirely performative. I watched her from a distance, and for just a moment I felt something unexpected. Pity. Because she had no idea that her perfect day, her moment of triumph, was about to become her public execution. James stood far from Victoria near the playground with their 2 children, a boy around 12 and a girl maybe 9. He looked haunted, watching his soon-to-be ex-wife from across the crowd, like a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. When his eyes met mine, he gave a slight nod. It was time. Maria arrived with Detective Chen and 2 uniformed officers who stayed back out of sight but ready. The forensic accountants positioned themselves near the pavilion. Everything was in place. At exactly 2 o'clock, Victoria took the microphone at a podium set up near the main entrance. The crowd gathered maybe 500 people, total children sitting on the grass in front, adults standing behind. Welcome everyone to this extraordinary day. Victoria began, her voice strong and confident. What you see before you represents 18 months of vision, dedication, and unwavering commitment to excellence. When I became president of the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association, I made a promise that we would not settle for mediocrity, that we would create something truly special for our community. Applause rippled through the crowd. Victoria smiled, basking in it. This complex represents more than just sports facilities. It represents our values, investment in our children, commitment to health and wellness, belief in the power of community. Future generations will gather here, will make memories here, will grow here, and they'll know that we had the courage to dream big. More applause. Some people were filming on their phones. A news camera captured everything. I want to thank everyone who made this possible, our contractors, our board members, and especially every family who believed in this vision enough to invest in it. The Sterling Sports Complex is your legacy. Our legacy. She paused dramatically, looking out over the crowd with what appeared to be genuine emotion. For a moment, I almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost. And now, Victoria said, picking up oversized ribbon-cutting scissors from a table beside the podium, it's time to officially open the Sterling Sports Complex. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Children jumped up and down. Camera flashes went off. Victoria walked toward the ribbon stretched across the entrance, scissors, raised smile, brilliant. She was 3 steps from the ribbon when I stepped forward, Maria beside me, Detective Chen, and the uniformed officers moving into position behind us. Mrs. Sterling, I called out, my voice loud enough to carry across the crowd. Before you cut that ribbon, I have a question. The crowd went quiet. Victoria's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. She turned to face me, scissors still in hand. Mr. Carson, she said pleasantly, though I caught the steel underneath. Is there something I can help you with? Yes, actually. I walked closer, feeling hundreds of eyes on me. I'm curious why you're opening a sports complex on property that doesn't belong to you. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Victoria laughed, but it sounded forced. I'm not sure what you mean. The land transfer was properly documented and filed with the county. This is all completely legal. The documents were forged, I said calmly. My aunt never agreed to sell this land. The signature on those transfer papers isn't hers. This entire complex, every building, every field, every dollar spent, it's all been built on my property without my permission. Gasps rippled through the crowd. News cameras swiveled toward me. Victoria's face went pale beneath her makeup. That's absurd, she stammered. I have documentation, so do I. I pulled out a folder from my jacket, held it up. Original deed. My aunt's will. Authenticated signatures. Survey reports. And 18 months of trail camera footage documenting every stage of construction on my land. Victoria's hand trembled slightly, the scissors wavering. You're lying. You're trying to extort the community to steal what we've built. Mrs. Sterling, Detective Chen stepped forward, badge visible. I'm Detective Sarah Chen with the County Fraud Division. We need to talk about some financial irregularities in the HOA accounts, specifically about $350,000 that appears to be missing. The color drained completely from Victoria's face. The scissors fell from her hand, clattering on the pavement. And that's when everything fell apart. For a moment, Victoria just stood there, frozen like a statue. The scissors lay at her feet. Her perfect smile had vanished, replaced by an expression I can only describe as pure terror. Then she tried to run. She actually turned and bolted toward the parking lot, her designer heels clicking frantically on the pavement. The crowd gasped. Children started crying. One of the uniformed officers moved quickly, intercepting her before she'd made it 20 feet. Mrs. Sterling, the officer, said firmly, "We need you to come with us to answer some questions." "Get your hands off me." Victoria's voice was shrill, completely different from the polished tone she'd used moments before. "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of this association. I'll have your badge. I'll have all your badges." Her makeup was already running, whether from sweat or tears, I couldn't tell. The elegant woman who'd stood at the podium had transformed into something desperate and unhinged. Victoria James pushed through the crowd, their 2 children clinging to his sides, looking terrified. "Stop. Please, just stop." She looked at him, and something cracked in her expression. "James, what are you doing here? Why did you bring the kids? This is supposed to be my day, your day." James's voice was thick with emotion. "Victoria, look at what you've done. Look at these people." He gestured to the crowd, hundreds of residents staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to fury to betrayal. "They trusted you. We all trusted you." "I did this for us," Victoria screamed. For this family, for our legacy, I built something magnificent. You built it on lies and stolen money, James said quietly. And you built it on someone else's land. Detective Chen stepped forward, producing a document from her briefcase. Mrs. Sterling, I have a warrant to search your home and office. We have evidence of multiple counts of fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent, no. Victoria lunged forward, not at the detective but at me. The officer caught her, but not before she got close enough that I could see her eyes wild, desperate, completely unmoored from reality. This is your fault. You did this. You're destroying everything I built. You built it on my land, I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. Without my permission, using forged documents. And you paid for it with money you stole from your neighbors. A woman in the crowd, I recognized her as the one who'd asked Victoria about payment flexibility, pushed forward. Is that true? Did you steal our assessment payments? I allocated resources, Victoria shouted. I made strategic financial decisions. That's what leaders do. You wouldn't understand. You couldn't possibly. I paid $15,000, another voice yelled. My family skipped our vacation so we could pay that assessment. I took out a loan, someone else shouted. We almost lost our house because we couldn't make the payments. The crowd's mood was shifting from shock to anger. People were pulling out their phones, some recording, others probably checking their HOA payment records. News cameras captured everything, Victoria being restrained by police residents, shouting questions, children crying, chaos, spreading like wildfire. Maria stepped beside me, speaking loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Mr. Carson is the legal owner of this property, and has been since he inherited it 3 years ago. Mrs. Sterling filed fraudulent documents, claiming ownership transferred from his deceased aunt. We have authenticated records, proving the forgery. Additionally, a forensic audit has revealed that Mrs. Sterling embezzled approximately $350,000 from HOA funds over the past 18 months. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. $350,000. People started shouting over each other. Where did the money go? How long has this been happening? What about our assessments? Patricia, the older woman who'd stopped attending meetings, pushed to the front. Her face was red with fury. I paid that $15,000 with my late husband's life insurance. I trusted you, Victoria. We all trusted you. Victoria's legs seemed to give out. She sagged in the officer's grip, no longer fighting, just defeated. The perfectly styled hair was disheveled now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. She looked small, suddenly nothing like the commanding presence who'd stood at that podium minutes before. I was building something important, she whispered, but it was barely audible. Something that would last. Something people would remember me for. They'll remember you, James said, his voice breaking. Just not the way you wanted. He turned to leave, shepherding their children away from the scene. The kids were both crying now, clinging to their father, and I felt a stab of guilt. They were innocent in all this. They'd just watched their mother's public destruction, and they'd carry that memory forever. Detective Chen finished reading Victoria her rights and led her toward an unmarked police car. As they walked past me, Victoria stopped, forcing the detective to pause. You could have stopped this, she said to me, her voice hollow. Months ago. You could have come to me privately, could have worked something out. But you wanted this. You wanted to humiliate me. I met her eyes. You forged documents to steal my land. You embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who trusted you. You lied to everyone every day for 18 months. I didn't humiliate you, Victoria. You did that yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. She had nothing to say to that. The detective led her away, and I watched the police car disappear down the road, carrying Victoria Sterling away from her moment of triumph toward what would probably be a lengthy prison sentence. The crowd was in chaos now. HOA board members were being surrounded by angry residents demanding answers. News reporters were interviewing anyone who'd talk. Children were being ushered away from the shouting adults. The grand opening celebration had become a crime scene. Maria touched my arm. We should go. There's going to be lawsuits, insurance claims, a massive legal mess to sort out. But the property is yours, and we have everything documented. You'll be fine. As we walked toward the parking lot, I heard someone say, "So what happens to the complex now? Is it just abandoned?" I stopped, turned around, saw hundreds of faces, angry, confused, betrayed, but also hopeful. Because beneath all the chaos and fury, they were seeing these fields, these facilities, this beautiful complex that had been built, and they wanted it to mean something. An idea formed. It was barely a seed, but it was there. Nothing's decided yet, I called out. But this is my property, and I'll figure out what comes next. I promise you it won't be abandoned, and it won't be built on lies. Patricia caught my eye and nodded. Others in the crowd looked less hostile, now more curious. They'd been victims of Victoria's fraud just as much as I had, maybe more. We left them there, standing in front of the Sterling Sports Complex, which would definitely need a new name, and I felt the weight of what came next, settling on my shoulders. I'd won. Victoria's empire had crumbled. Justice had been served. But now I had to figure out what to build in its place, and this time it would be built on truth. The days following Victoria's arrest were a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and community chaos. The story went viral. HOA president arrested for fraud at grand opening ceremony made headlines across the state. News outlets couldn't get enough of the dramatic footage. Victoria's perfect smile crumbling her desperate attempt to flee the crowd's stunned reaction. Within 72 hours, Victoria was formally charged with 14 counts, including grand theft, embezzlement, forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. Her bail was set at $500,000, which her family couldn't afford. She remained in county jail, and according to James, she'd stopped speaking entirely, just sitting in her cell, staring at the wall. The HOA board dissolved immediately. Emergency elections were held, and a completely new board was installed, led by Patricia, who'd finally found her voice. Their first action was to hire an independent auditor to examine every transaction Victoria had ever authorized. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. The final tally was staggering $378,000 embezzled over 18 months. Victoria had created ghost vendors, inflated contractor invoices, approved fake expenditures, and even taken cash directly from the HOA account. She'd funneled the money into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, apparently planning to flee the country once the project was complete. But here's where things took an unexpected turn, one I hadn't seen coming. I was sitting in Maria's office 3 weeks after the grand opening disaster, discussing options for the property, when she pulled out a dusty cardboard box. "This came from the estate executor," Maria said. "Your aunt's personal effects. They were in storage, and I had them sent over. I thought you might want to go through them before we finalize everything." Inside the box were Aunt Eleanor's journals, decades of handwritten entries documenting her life. I started reading mainly out of curiosity, looking for memories of the summers I'd spent on the property. Then I found an entry dated 30 years ago, and my blood ran cold. "Met Margaret Sterling today at the community garden. Her daughter Victoria is such a sweet girl, 7 years old, all imagination and creativity. Margaret says Victoria wants to be an architect when she grows up, wants to design beautiful buildings. She drew me a picture of a fairy castle. Such a kind soul." There were more entries. Aunt Eleanor and Margaret Sterling had been close friends for years. Victoria had visited the property as a child, had played in those same woods I'd walked through. There were photos, a young Victoria with grass-stained knees climbing trees, laughing, and then an entry from 15 years ago ran into Margaret at the grocery store. "She looks exhausted, worried. Says Victoria is working 80-hour weeks at her law firm, barely sleeping, obsessed with making partner. Margaret is concerned about who her daughter is becoming. The sweet girl who drew fairy castles has turned into someone Margaret barely recognizes. Power and success have consumed her." And finally, an entry from just before Aunt Eleanor died. Margaret passed away last month. Cancer. Victoria didn't come to the funeral, said she had a deposition she couldn't miss. Her own mother's funeral. I keep thinking about that little girl who used to play in my woods, who would spend hours imagining magical kingdoms. Where did she go? What happened to turn imagination into ambition, dreams into obsession? Sometimes I think we lose ourselves so gradually that we don't notice until we're someone we never meant to become. I sat in Maria's office, those journals in my hands, and felt something I hadn't expected: grief. Not for Victoria as she was now, but for the girl she'd been. For the path that had led from tree-climbing child to a woman sitting in a jail cell having destroyed her own life. "You okay?" Maria asked. "My aunt knew her," I said quietly. "Victoria played on this land as a kid, before everything went wrong." The next day I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I called a community meeting at the complex, the first since the grand opening disaster. 200 residents showed up, many of them still angry, all of them curious about what would happen to the property. "I want to start by saying, I understand your anger," I began. "You paid for this complex in good faith. You trusted someone who betrayed that trust. And now you're looking at this beautiful facility that's built on lies and stolen money." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I could tear it all down," I continued. "It's my land, my legal right. I could bulldoze everything and you'd have nothing but empty woods again." The crowd went silent. "But I'm not going to do that." Because my Aunt Eleanor, the woman Victoria claimed to have made a deal with, she would have hated that. She believed in community and giving people second chances and turning broken things into something beautiful. I pulled out the journals, held them up. My aunt knew Victoria as a child. She played in these woods. She was kind and imaginative and full of dreams. And somewhere along the way, she lost herself. Success became more important than integrity. Winning became more important than honesty. And she destroyed her life trying to build a legacy. I looked out at the faces: Patricia, the woman who'd lost her vacation money, James sitting in the back with his children, Diane standing off to the side. So, here's what I'm proposing. I'm going to lease this property to the community for 99 years for $1 a year. You'll manage it through the HOA, the new board that actually represents your interests. Any fees charged for facility use will go into a community fund to help families who are struggling financially. And this complex will be renamed the Eleanor Carson Memorial Sports Complex, after a woman who believed in second chances and community. The room erupted. People were standing, some crying, some shouting questions. Patricia pushed to the front, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "After everything that happened?" "Because my aunt taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy, it's building something better from the ruins they left behind." Victoria wanted a legacy. Instead, she's going to prison. But we can take what she built with lies and turn it into something genuine, something that actually helps people. 3 months later, the Eleanor Carson Memorial Sports Complex officially opened quietly with no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no news cameras, just families gathering to use the facilities. I'd moved into a small house I built on the remaining 5 acres of the property, with a porch that overlooked the fields. Victoria pled guilty to all charges. Her attorney argued for leniency, based on mental health issues, but the judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison. James won full custody of their children and started rebuilding their lives. He visits, sometimes brings the kids to play on the fields their mother built with stolen money. Diane's accounting practice actually grew after the publicity. People respected her integrity. Patricia became an excellent HOA president, implementing financial oversight that made fraud nearly impossible. The community fund had helped 6 families avoid foreclosure. And me, I coach youth soccer on Saturday mornings, on fields built with my enemy's hubris and my aunt's kindness. Sometimes I sit on my porch in the evening watching families enjoy the complex, and I think about Victoria, about the girl who climbed trees and drew fairy castles, about the woman who destroyed herself chasing recognition. My aunt was right. We lose ourselves gradually, one compromise at a time, until we wake up one day and don't recognize who we've become. But she also taught me this: it's never too late to choose differently. To choose integrity over revenge, to choose community over personal victory, to choose building something meaningful over destroying your enemies. Victoria wanted to be remembered, and she will be just not the way she hoped, but the complex that bears my aunt's name, that will serve families for generations. And maybe that's the real legacy worth building. You know what I learned through all of this? That hurt people hurt people. Victoria wasn't born a criminal. She was once a child who drew pictures of fairy castles. But somewhere along the way, she started measuring her worth by power and recognition, instead of character and integrity. And that gradual slide from who we want to be to who we become is one of life's greatest dangers. We all face moments where we have to choose between what's right and what's easy, between revenge and restoration, between tearing down and building up. I could have destroyed everything Victoria built. I could have watched that complex get bulldozed and felt satisfied. But what would that have accomplished? More destruction, more loss, more pain. The truth is, the greatest victories aren't won by crushing our enemies. They're won by refusing to become like them, by choosing integrity when corruption would be easier, by choosing community when isolation would be simpler, by choosing to build something meaningful from the ruins that others left behind. So here's my question for you. What are you building with your life? A legacy of power and recognition that crumbles under scrutiny, or something genuine that serves others and lasts beyond your lifetime? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about a time you chose to do the right thing, even when revenge would have been easier. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that integrity matters more than victory, hit that subscribe button. Because we need more stories about people who choose to be better, not just bitter. The world has enough destruction. Let's build something better together.